Offered by Mr. Schweikert of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 864, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And look, this is actually just an amendment I've introduced on a number of these bills to make a point. I'm not going to ask for a vote on it. But I do want us to conceptually think about something, and I've been trying to find forms to say it over and over and over and over. We borrow every dime we as members of Congress vote on. Every dime of defense is now borrowed. Every dime of non-defense discretionary now is borrowed. And last fiscal year, we had what? 300 billion, maybe 400 billion of, let's call it Medicare, but in mandatory, that was borrowed. In this piece of legislation, 26.2% is our best calculation of the resources here, and many of them are really good programs, but we're borrowing it to send it to entities that do have their own taxing authority. It's an uncomfortable, but I do want us to think about, as we get more and more of our financial stresses, as our borrowing costs, now we saw Treasury yesterday basically release an update that's saying gross interest this fiscal year will top $1 trillion. You know what that means? Social Security is our number one spend. Interest just became our number 2 spend. Medicare is our number 3 spend. And defense now is our number 4 spend. We're not going to balance the budget through discretionary. But somewhere here, I don't know how to get it into our lexicon and our culture that everything we now vote on as members of Congress comes off of borrowed money. And with that, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I claim the time in opposition.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Our luck ran out. I rise in strong opposition to the amendment. This amendment would further cut funding by 26% for important programs and services that provide opportunities for working families. The underlying bill already cuts tens of billions of dollars from programs that help families and low-income workers. This amendment would cut an additional $38 billion from education, health, job training, worker protection, and the Social Security Administration's operating budget. For instance, this amendment would cut Head Start by another $2.9 billion, almost $3.7 billion below this year, 2023, leading to over 250,000 children losing access to high-quality early learning programs. It would cut the Child Care and Development Block Grant, by $2.1 billion. This is amidst the child care crisis, when parents want to work, but they cannot find affordable child care for their kids. It would cut the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP, which is a bipartisan priority, by more than $1 billion. It would cut senior nutrition, including Meals on Wheels, by $277 million, resulting in more than 1 million low-income seniors losing access to home-delivered or prepackaged meals. Cut biomedical research at the National Institutes of Health by more than $11 billion, resulting in a reduction of more than 10,000 new grants for potentially life-saving research. Cut nearly $2 billion for mental health and substance use disorder services, when CDC data show nearly 110,000 deaths in 2022 related to drug overdoses, the highest number ever. Cut Title I funding for low-income public schools by $3.2 billion, reducing needed resources for 25 million low-income students. Cut special education grants to states by $3.8 billion, reducing support for services for 7.5 million students with disabilities. Cut Pell Grants by $5.8 billion for students and families in need. And yes, cut the Social Security Administration's operating budget by more than $3 billion. It would shutter field offices and eliminate service for seniors. It's interesting to me that when it comes to the programs that are encompassed in the labor, health, human services, and education appropriations bills, that there's a great worry about a deficit. There's a great worry about borrowing. But when we did $2 trillion for the richest 0.1% of the people in this country and the biggest corporations who pay no taxes, no one batted an eyelash. We continue on that road of looking at the biggest corporations who pay no taxes. And we will continue to make sure that they profit and that working families, middle-class families, the most vulnerable families are at risk because someone has decided that it's no time to borrow and it's no time to make public investments in their lives. I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to go into correcting the TCJA math, but I would point out Democrats functionally through the Biden have borrowed $4.8 trillion in functioning 3 years, and the 1.7, actually the multiplier if you take a look at the tax receipts, but being on Ways and Means. But I do want to go to a point. The gentlewoman actually just made my morality argument. These are important programs. They serve a purpose, but yet our failure to actually address the debt, because the fact of the matter is the primary driver of the U.S. debt is our demographics. Something we don't like to say. We got old. Today and the 30 years forward, 100% of the growth of debt, and our office now is calculating 130, 140 billion during that time, particularly if we start to calculate in the new interest rate regime, that Medicare, and if we backfill Social Security in 9 years when the trust fund is gone, it's going to consume every available dollar. And you're going to see programs like this that we care about squeezed. So that's actually, my point is, if these are moral, they serve a purpose, our inability to have an honest conversation about the debt is immoral. And I've come here, and even last night, I spent 1 hour showing Democrat tax hikes. Fine. But the tax hikes that have been proposed for every category on $400,000 and up only brought in about 1.5% of GDP when adjusted. We borrowed 8.4 last year. We have a math problem. And I'm saddened because it will always break down to Republican versus Democrat. It's demographics. But I think the reason I do this amendment is to force a little bit of contemplation of the reality we're at, that if we don't step and do this, these are the sorts of cuts that are in our future. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields.
Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
We have a revenue problem. We have a serious revenue problem. And the majority looks for every excuse to cut back the opportunity for increased revenues. Why do I say that? We are told that we leave $1 trillion on the table every year because we do not enforce our tax laws on the wealthiest, the billionaires, the Amazons, the Hewlett-Packards, the corporations who pay no tax. We cut the heart and soul out of the IRS when they're collecting millions of dollars from tax cheats. It's a revenue problem.
The gentlelady's tax is retired.
I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. The question on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the no has it. The amendment is agreed to. Not agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 142, printed on the Part B of House Report 118-272. For what purpose does the